Welcome to episode 109 of Angela Watson's Truth for Teachers. I'm your host, Angela Watson, and I'm here to speak life, encouragement, and truth into the minds and hearts of educators and get you energized for the week ahead. Today, I'm going to be doing a coaching call with a teacher named Kristen and discuss how to reduce your work hours and streamline parent communication without looking like a slacker. Visit truthforteachers.com to get links to recommended resources and to share your thoughts on the show. So the episode you're about to hear is a free coaching call that I conducted with a graduate of the 40-Hour Teacher Workweek Club. Her name is Kristen, and she's a Year 4 teacher in Australia, which is equivalent to 4th grade in the US. You will adore listening to her lovely accent. I could talk to her all day. Kristen is in her 6th year of teaching, and she's feeling like she's spending way too much time communicating with parents and answering emails. And she's also feeling nervous about what cutting back on the amount of time that she spends on these things, as well as other tasks in general, might do to her reputation in the school. She's one of those teachers who's the last one out of the parking lot, and a lot of times she's doing it because she feels pressure to stay late, and she feels like it looks bad if you leave early. I talked with Kristen in this coaching call for a good 45 minutes, a little bit longer than that even. And what I'm going to play here in the podcast for you is just the second half of that conversation, where we're focused on email communication, because I know that's an issue that probably a lot of you listening are dealing with, feeling like you're spending just way too much time on parent communication via email. And also where we talk about giving yourself permission to stop connecting hours worked with effectiveness. So you're going to hear that conversation in a moment. But first, I want to sum up the main points that Kristen and I discussed in the first half of the audio so that you're up to speed. The plan of action for Kristen, and probably a good plan of action for you too, is to focus on proactive communication and rapport building with parents so that their first interaction with you isn't when there's a problem or when you need something from them. My recommendation was that she call all of her parents on the first day of school just to make contact with them. When you only teach one class of students, this really shouldn't take longer than an hour max, because most parents aren't going to answer. You're just going to be leaving voicemails. So it's a gesture of goodwill. It's an opportunity to sort of reach out and establish that rapport and relationship right away. And I see it as an investment of time. It's something that's going to pay off in rapport building and relationship later. We also talked about personalized, positive communication that makes a big impact. One suggestion that Kristen really liked is sending a physical postcard to each child's house. Postcards are pretty rare and therefore pretty special these days, and taking just a few minutes to handwrite one can make a big impact. So I recommended to Kristen that she address one to each child in her class and get all the addresses and everything on there ready to go, and then she can just fill it out with something positive and complimentary about the child each week, just one a week. Mail out one postcard per week. And then by the end of the year, she will have contacted every single family. So the idea here is that you're looking for something you can do that will make an impression on parents and show that you're willing to go above and beyond and you really care about their kid without it being something that you are committed to doing on a daily basis where they're expecting a daily outreach, because you probably aren't going to have time for that. So find something that feels special and unusual and unique and will make a difference and be impactful to the families that you serve. But you don't have to expect yourself to send personalized messages beyond what you can reasonably send in whatever parent-teacher communication app or tools that you're using. So that's what we talked about in the first part. You're going to be listening in now on this coaching call right when we start talking about Kristen's email communication. One of the principles from the 40-Hour Teacher Workweek Club that Kristen has utilized successfully is having templates to use when replying to parent emails. So if you use Gmail, check out the canned response feature. That will allow you to insert an opening greeting, a closing greeting, and also any frequently used replies. If your school email provider doesn't have that kind of functionality, that's okay. You can just copy and paste from a Google Doc. So have some canned responses. The idea is that you're creating this database of nicely worded responses that you can pull from instead of having to start from scratch every single time. And that's especially important when it's sort of a delicate matter or something that can take a while to explain. Figure out a way to say it exactly the way you want it. Proofread it, make sure it's perfect, and then save it. Reuse it again, and you can adapt it for different situations. So I provide a template like this for club members, and Kristen has found that that was a big time saver for her for sure. So let's jump into the call right now, right at the place where we just talked about those templates, and I'm summarizing what we talked about before strategizing on how to reduce the amount of time she spends on emails with parents. Okay, so let me recap some of the things we've talked about then. So we've talked about calling them all on that first day, if you can, sending out a postcard or some sort of communication once to each child during the school year. So each parent gets some sort of personalized communication about their child. Using a template when you're emailing parents, but not letting them know that it's a template, changing it up enough so that it's personalized. And maybe handling behavior issues via phone call, since you don't have that many of them. It might just be, it might end up being less work for you to just do it that way. And then they can hear your tone, you can hear their tone, and that sort of thing. I want to talk a little bit more about the emails, because I know you mentioned like sometimes you're dealing with this kind of stuff late at night and that sort of thing. How many emails a day are you getting, or a week, whatever, are you getting from parents, and when are you typically responding to them?
I probably get, I feel like I spend hours on emails, and it's not always parents, but I typically answer them. I've done all my prep for the next day. I've done all my planning. I've got everything ready, and then it's the emails. Or if it's straight after school and I start on the emails, then all the planning and prep doesn't happen until I end up staying back late after school. So I'm finding that if I do it straight after school, I end up staying later than I expected. And if I do it last thing, then it stresses me because I have to finish it before I can go, because I need to contact these parents and things like that. So I don't tend to check it before school because it's not enough time to reply. And I was for a while I was checking it all day, and I just found that was just overwhelming. And I read something you said about putting it in a specific like office hours kind of thing. I've been trying to figure out when my office hours should be, and I haven't been able to decide. So I keep ending up spending more time than I want to on them. But so typically after school, I think.
I think that's a great time for office hours, because like you said, before school, there's not enough time, and you don't want to feel like you're right in the middle of something and then you have to stop. So creating these office hours, these set boundaries about times when you check email, read email, respond to email is really smart. And then just sort of being consistent with it. So what would be the end of the school day if you were to finish all your tasks for whatever need to be done after school and then get ready to leave? What time would that be usually for you?
So we finish at 3:05, and I'm usually leaving by 6 or 6:30.
So what time would you answer emails?
So I'd either start at 3:05 and do it for an hour or two, or I would do everything else first and then start at, say, 5 and then finish it whenever I finish.
Okay. So emails could take you a good hour a day then, you're saying?
Yeah, I could be on emails for that long. Like, maybe not every day like that, but yeah, if I get a sticky one, then I'm there for a while.
Do you also do work at home, or do you just stay until that time and then you're done?
I'm done. I've done the whole bring work home, and it doesn't work for me. I end up procrastinating, and then it gets very late, and then I get tired and stressed. So everything has to be done at school, and then I walk out of there and I leave it.
So I wonder if you could make it your goal to start the emails at 5, like finish everything by 5, do emails at 5, and as soon as the emails are done, you can go. Knowing that like you have to leave at 6. I mean, for me, email is sort of a dreaded chore. And so setting like time limits like that really helps. Like, okay, I'm going to set aside the next 30 minutes and I'm going to knock out as many as possible. And if I can finish them all in less than 30 minutes, then I'm done and I'm free. If it takes me longer than that, if I'm getting to 25 minutes and I still have 10 left, I know I need to move a little bit quicker at that point. So having that sort of like time boundary really helps, because otherwise I will labor over each and every word. I'll add in these intros, outros, it just gets to be too much. Can you relate to that?
Definitely. Yeah, that's exactly what happens. I'm sorry, 45 minutes a day would be enough, I think, to keep on top of my emails.
Okay. Another thing that can be really helpful with email is to remember that the person you're replying to also has a lot of email, also does not like having a ton of messages, and is also spending way too much time in their inbox. So by keeping things short, it can feel rude, because I think we're still all sort of in the habit of, back in the day, email was sort of the special fun thing. And we would write these big, like, long letters, hi, how are you? Hope your summer is going well. Hope you're whatever, and then you leave another conclusion that's sort of the same way. And email doesn't really need to be that way anymore. And it's okay to just get right to the point and try to, I try to make mine 2 to 3 sentences max, because it's going to save me time and it's going to save the other person time. It's actually more respectful on them if I'm not wasting time with these paragraphs of information and just sort of get to the point. So unless it's a really sensitive issue, I mean, obviously if we're talking to a parent about a concern with their child, then maybe it's probably gonna be a lot faster. Just hop on the phone, say what you need to say, and be done. Because by the time you word everything perfectly in writing, you should have just done the phone call. But if it's not that sort of scenario, keep it short. And remember, you're actually being more polite by being short. Those long-winded emails, feel polite, but actually they're just creating more work for the other person. And then they feel like they have to respond to you in that same way. So sort of setting that tone for your communication where, I'm going to keep my email short and to the point for you so that you can do the same thing for me. And then we're sort of helping each other out.
Yeah, and I might even, could I even say that at the information sessions when they come, say I prefer email, but
good idea.
If they're short, please don't feel like that's rude. It's just, I'm trying to be efficient and short for you to save you time and to save us all time. So that.
Yep. Yeah. I think that's a great plan. Explain that to them up front so they know.
Yeah, because I know I'm particular about my English because I'm teaching their children English.
That's right.
Like if I don't write English, then I feel like they might judge me because, what are you teaching my child if you don't know how to use your paragraphing? But I think keeping it short is polite. If it's the new way to be polite, I'll gladly take that on board.
Yep. So that's sort of a small shift that you can make and just try to cut it down a little bit more. I want to sort of wrap up by leading to one more thing that is sort of related to this and talking about your work hours and, your habit of leaving around 6, because you mentioned that part of you feels like working those long hours is appreciated by parents and leadership in your school because it's seen as, the way that you phrased it was that it's seen as, more effort and better teaching than someone who puts in just as much unseen time at home. Like you feel like there's some value to you by doing the work at school and being there and being visible. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about how I've had this goal for so long to reduce my work hours and, I've used a lot of these strategies. And then I was trying to work out what's stopping me still from, now that I've got more efficient practices, why am I still staying there so late? And I sort of came to the realization that it is respected. People make comments like, oh, you work so hard, or, you're always there. And it sort of has this culture of, well, that makes a better teacher a little bit from parents or colleagues or leadership. And I think that worries me, and I don't know how to change that shift in my thinking to, it is okay to go home because that makes me a better teacher. And, if I'm well rested and I'm just struggling with that, I guess, is that idea that if you are working late, that you're putting in more effort and that it's more appreciated.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a really common belief to have, because I think most people haven't really considered that there isn't a direct correlation between the number of hours you work and your effectiveness. We all know excellent teachers who have drawn really firm boundaries around their time and they just refuse to work nonstop. And we all know teachers who stay at school until, as late as possible, but they're still teaching like it's 1984. So it's not really about how much you're working, but whether or not you're working on the right things. And I think you and I understand that well because we've spent a whole year of the club talking about this. But I want to hear a little bit more about the reaction to better boundaries that you're getting at your school. So has anyone in your school community, have any parents, any colleagues, has your administrators, anyone directly said something that would lead you to believe that they think it's problematic to leave work before 6?
Yeah, there's been some comments about other teachers who leave earlier. So, the teachers that leave at 3 o'clock or whatever, they just there's this sort of mentality a little bit that maybe they're not working as hard, or that they're, like they clock off at 3 o'clock and that's it, they're done for the day, when they might go home and spend hours on it. You don't know.
Do you think that those comments were meant for everyone to take that to heart, or were those comments directed at a few specific teachers who were sort of taking the easy way out?
Yeah, probably at those specific teachers.
Okay, that's what I'm thinking, because that's the type of thing that tends to happen in schools where, there's a couple people who aren't doing things the right way, and then everyone sort of gets an admonishment. And what can happen in those situations, if it's coming from the principal, even if it's, maybe coming from colleagues who are sort of feeling pressure, what happens is all the people who are doing the right thing start questioning themselves and thinking, are they talking about me that one time that I had to leave at 3:15 because I had a dentist appointment?
Yeah.
And you start getting paranoid, and you start thinking, oh my gosh, they're watching me. They think I'm not doing a good job. And meanwhile, it was never about you at all. It was about the person who is sitting at their desk all day, not interacting with the kids, giving the kids worksheets, and then leaving right at 3 o'clock. That's who it was directed for. But because everyone heard the message, it sort of makes you think that now they're talking about you, and they really weren't. Do you think that could be the case here?
I think so. I know that's part of it. I feel like, it's sort of twofold, because you've got, on the one side, you've got those specific people maybe who appear to not be doing as much work. And like you said, if they are sitting in the classroom and just getting worksheets and then just going home, then that's the one side of it. But then on the other side, you do have that acknowledgement and those compliments for when you stay late, or like parents saying, thank you so much for all the hard work you do, you're always here, or thank you, the leadership will recognize you as like the person who's always last to leave, or something. Like the recognition that comes with it, I think, is sort of reinforcing that culture of appreciating the hours rather than the quality.
Yeah, I think you've tapped onto something important, because it does sort of give you this mixed feeling. Like, part of you feels like, I'm being recognized for it and appreciated. And when we do this, people like it. And yet I know that it's not really indicative of the quality of my teaching. I know there's teachers who leave earlier and bring work home, and they're working just as hard as me. And I also know that I'm probably working too many hours. I could probably do as good of a job in fewer hours. Because when you tell me that you want to leave before 6, you're not saying, I want to slack off on my teaching and not really do that great of a job for kids. Right. What you're really saying is, I believe that I can do an awesome job for kids and work fewer hours. I think I can be a little bit more efficient and get more done in less time and leave a little sooner.
Yeah, it's definitely a problem. So.
Yeah, it is hard, and I think that part of it is just realizing that a lot of the pressure comes from you, and trying to shift your focus so that you're not worried about what other people will think, because you can't make your choices based on that. When I was a teacher, I worked around 40 to 45 hours a week in school. Sometimes I would bring things home, but that was about my average work week. And I know that was baffling to a lot of my colleagues and to my administrators, and they couldn't figure out how I did what I did in that amount of time. But to tell you the truth, no one really cared, because I got the job done. If my students weren't learning, or if every time my principal came into the room, I'm just sitting at my desk and the kids are just, watching a movie, I think a lot of questions would have been raised about my hours. But my classroom was clean, it was organized, it was cheerful looking. The kids were happy, they were engaged. Their learning growth and their test scores were comparable to all the others at my grade level. My classroom management was solid, so things appeared orderly in the room. And, when you're escorting kids around the classroom or around the school, things appeared to be orderly. I had a rapport with students that was really plainly evident. And I had a rapport with parents. So there were very few parents who ever complained about me. I had good parent involvement, good support. And I had a good attitude for the most part. For the most part, I appeared to be enjoying my work. So those are the things that other people are looking for when they're making a determination about whether or not you're an effective teacher. And I'm not saying whether that's right or wrong. because that's, they're making a judgment without really knowing what's happening in your classroom.
Yeah.
But that's a reality. People make judgments about you as a teacher based on those types of things. What is your attitude like? What does your room look like? How are kids and parents interacting with you? Those are the kind of characteristics they're looking at. And if you seem to have everything under control and no one's complaining about you, and the data proves that your students are clearly making learning gains, then I'm telling you, people will leave you alone and they will not question you, because there's too many other problems happening in the school for them to be gossiping about you or trying to tear you down. And that includes parents too. If you are returning student work on a timely basis and you're very responsive to their messages and their child's coming home happy, they're not going to give you a hard time. They don't care how many hours you're working. They only notice your work hours when there's a suspicion that you're not doing a good job. That's when they start paying attention to who's leaving when. If you are doing a good job and their kid's happy and they feel like they have good communication with you, it really doesn't make a big difference to them. So all that to say, if you're fearful that other people are going to judge you if you leave school earlier, I'm telling you that when you're an awesome teacher, they will not care. So prove those assumptions wrong to them. It's really worth taking a risk here, because this is about your work-life balance. And so
definitely.
It's worth trying to take a risk here, prove it to them that you can do a better job in fewer hours, and really prove it to yourself too. Look for those little places that you can, cut back on the amount of emails that you're answering and that sort of thing, and look for ways to streamline and be more efficient. And people will, in your school building, will see your heart for kids, and they will see how much you put into this job. You give 110% while you're there. And if you also happen to leave at 4:30 p.m., and go home and take care of yourself, I promise you it's not going to be an issue, because they see the results that you're getting with kids and how much work you're doing.
Thank you. Yeah, just like let all of that speak for it instead of the hours. I never thought to look at those things, that parents, that teachers and leaders, they care about your classroom and your attitude and your student relationships and the outcomes that your students are getting. I didn't really think to factor that in, because those things are all fine. So if that's what they're looking at, then I can give, that will actually help, I think, to change how I think about it.
And also because I think you've been at the same school now for a while, you already have a good reputation in that school. Like I just already sense that about you, because I see how hard you work and how much your heart is in this and what a good job you want to do for kids. So that's already evident there. You're not in a place where you're having to sort of prove yourself, because you've already shown that.
Yeah, I thank you. And I think I agree with that. That like most parents know me and know who I am, and that I do care for my kids. And I think it's about just giving yourself permission and looking at it differently. I'm really, really grateful for that perspective, actually, because I'd never looked at it that way before.
Yep, you've already done the hard work. You've already built your reputation. They already trust you, and you're already doing an awesome job. So the only person left now really that you're trying to prove anything to is just yourself, and sort of letting yourself have permission to say, okay, I believe I can do a better job and still leave, at a decent hour, and look for ways to streamline and not worry about how that's going to look to others, because you've already proven yourself, I think.
Thank you very much.
You are very welcome, Kristen. I appreciate your time. It was lovely talking to you.
Yeah, you too. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening in on this coaching call with Kristen. I hope it's helped you think of some ways that you can get more impact from the way you spend your time at school and your time communicating with parents. And I hope it will help you release some of that pressure to do things only because you're afraid of what others will think if you don't do them. Stay focused on relationships with kids and families, and don't worry about how it looks if your car isn't the last one out of the parking lot at night. When your heart and attitude and time are clearly focused on what matters, other people are going to see that, and you don't have to go out of your way to prove yourself. Let your relationships with kids and the learning that happens in your classroom speak for itself. Have a great week, and remember, it's not going to be easy. It's going to be worth it. Truth for Teachers is a proud member of the Education Podcast Network. Podcasts for educators, podcasts by educators. For more great podcast recommendations, go to edupodcastnetwork.com. That's edupodcastnetwork.com.